The rain pounded the ground that evening, turning the streets into gleaming ribbons under the dim glow of the streetlights. In the middle of all that, a young woman sat on the narrow wooden bench at the lone bus stop near the old bridge, her white dress soaked through. Her veil was tangled, and her hair fell across her face in messy strands. Her arms shook, but it was hard to tell if it was from the cold or from shock. She clutched a small bouquet of wilted flowers. Petals kept falling onto the ground. She wore no shoes, and her feet were cut and bleeding. Lightning lit up the sky, and the thunder came so loud that it made the bench rattle. Each time it roared, the woman trembled, her tears mixed with the rain running down her face. She did not look up, even as a bus drove by without stopping. The driver must have seen her. Every now and then a car came close, splashing water onto the roadside, but no one offered her a ride. Her dress, which should have been bright and pretty, looked sad and stained. Her name was Maria. She had been a bride just a few hours earlier, or so she had hoped. But all of that was gone now, like the petals slipping from her bouquet. She was left with nothing, not even a coat to keep her warm. The world around her seemed cold and cruel, reflecting how she felt inside. She wanted to vanish or be forgotten. At that moment, the future felt like a dark tunnel with no light at the end. She looked up at the sky, silently asking how everything had gone so wrong. Maria never expected to end up at that lonely bus stop, soaked to the bone, with the wedding bells still ringing in her head. She also never thought that the kindness of a stranger would change everything. That night at the bus stop was the most unsettling moment of her entire life. She had arrived there without money, without a suitcase, and without any plan. She had nowhere else to be. And that was when he appeared. A poor waiter named Angelo saw her in that pitiful state. Below is the story of how one small act of mercy can alter the course of people's lives. It is the story of how an ordinary man reached out to a woman in her most desperate hour. And strangely enough, it is also the story of how that same man found the best kind of treasure he could ever ask for. This is about caring for others when it costs us the most. It is about love that grows from the bleakest moments, and how it can lead to a future that no one could have predicted. In the end, the suspense of what truly happened both that day and in the days to follow may catch you by surprise. For sometimes, the greatest twists in life do not come with loud fireworks, but quietly, in the form of a helping hand. Chapter 1. The Night of Tears. Angelo walked slowly, trying to shield his head from the heavy rain. He was coming from the small Italian restaurant where he worked as a waiter. It had been a long day. The place was busy with guests who came to enjoy a warm meal despite the stormy weather. After cleaning tables, doing dishes, and serving endless cups of coffee, he finally got to leave close to midnight. His body ached, and he just wanted to crawl into bed. He turned the corner and saw a dim light at the bus stop. At first, it was just a regular evening sight except for the flash of white that caught his eye. Someone was there, and they were wearing something that appeared like a fancy dress. The closer he got, the more he realized it was a wedding gown. The woman looked drenched. Even from several steps away, Angelo could see her trembling, shoulders shaking from cold or tears. He paused, unsure if he should approach. It was not every day one encountered someone in a soggy wedding dress at a bus stop in the middle of the night, but something in his gut told him to check if she was okay. He stepped forward, water splashing around his worn-out shoes, and gently said, "Miss?" Maria did not respond right away. She lifted her head slightly, and when their eyes met, Angelo felt a painful tug at his heart. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her mascara was smudged down her cheeks. This was not just rain or cold. Something deeper was going on. "Miss?" he asked again, taking off his thin jacket. He hesitated for a second, worried she might be afraid if a stranger came too close. Very gently, he placed his coat around her shoulders, though it was almost soaked too. She whispered something that he could barely hear over the rain. He leaned in, catching only fragments of her words. Left. At the altar. The sound squeezed Angelo's heart. He did not know what to say at first. Angelo was not a man of means. He made barely enough to cover his rent and groceries. He lived in a tiny studio apartment across town, next to a run-down shoe repair shop. Yet, seeing this bride in such a heartbreaking state made him forget about his own exhaustion, about how late it was, or how little he had. In a gentle voice he said, "Let me help you. I can't leave you here." For a moment, she seemed unsure whether to trust him. But then she glanced down at her feet, where blood from a small cut mixed with muddy water. She knew she had nowhere else to go. She held onto his offered hand. He helped her stand, and the veil slipped off her head, blowing away in the wind, but neither of them tried to chase it. The veil disappeared into the darkness, much like the hope she had earlier that day. Angelo walked her to the next street, where the old bike he used for travel was leaning against the lamp-post. The chain often got stuck, and the tires were worn. Still, it was all he had. Carefully, he assisted Maria onto the back seat. He could feel the cold from her wet gown seeping through. He worried she might get sick. Wordlessly, they rode through the rainy streets toward his tiny apartment. He pedaled harder than usual, wanting to get her somewhere warm as soon as possible. Each time he glanced back, he saw her eyes half closed, water dripping off her hair. He could not help but feel that this night would change everything, though he did not know how. Chapter 2. Shelter in a tiny apartment. When they reached Angelo's apartment building, he parked his bike by the rusted fence. He led Maria up the creaky steps. The hallway lights flickered. The landlady was likely asleep by now, so no one peeked out to question them. They went to apartment 3C, where Angelo fumbled with his keys, his hands trembling from the cold and from nerves. He had never brought anyone to his place before, let alone a bride in a muddy gown. Inside, the apartment was as modest as one could imagine. A small bed lay against one wall, with faded sheets. There was a little kitchen area with a small stove and a tiny fridge. Next to the window was a single wooden table with two mismatched chairs. A threadbare rug covered part of the scuffed floor. That was all. "I'm sorry it's not much," Angelo said, flipping on the single overhead light that gave the room a dull yellow glow. "I can make some tea. You must be freezing." Maria just nodded, not even looking around the room. She stood near the door, arms wrapped around herself. Her teeth were chattering, and her eyes were unfocused. She looked so fragile that Angelo worried she might faint. He hurried to find a towel, which he offered to her. Then he rustled through his meager closet to find something dry for her to change into. He only had a spare pair of sweats and an old sweater, but it was better than nothing. "I'll turn around," he said gently, trying to give her a little bit of privacy as she peeled off the wet gown. He placed the clothes on the edge of the bed for her. When he heard her slip into them, he handed her the towel for her hair. The bride's dress hung over a chair, dripping water onto the floor. Angelo made a mental note to clean that up soon. Right now, his priority was to warm Maria up and see if she needed medical help for her feet. He put a pot of water on the stove, glancing at her every so often. She looked lost in thought. In a few minutes, the water boiled. He poured it into 2 chipped mugs, stirring in a tea bag and a spoonful of sugar. He placed 1 mug in her hands and was relieved to see her take a tiny sip. The warmth seemed to settle her a bit, and her eyes flickered with the faintest hint of thankfulness. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds being the rain against the window and the quiet hum of the old refrigerator. Angelo wanted to ask what happened, but he did not want to push her. He himself was not sure how to handle such a situation. All he knew was that no one should be left alone in that condition. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice shaky but a touch louder than before. "I'm Maria," she said. "I'm so sorry for the trouble. I didn't know where else to go." Angelo shook his head. "Please don't be sorry. I'm the one who brought you here. My name is Angelo. I work at a small restaurant down the street. I promise you're safe here." She gave him a weak nod. Tears threatened to well up again. "Thank you," she said, biting her lip. "I really mean it. I was left at the altar, and everything fell apart." Angelo did not press for details. Instead, he said softly, "I'm sorry you went through that. You can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure things out in the morning." Maria nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. She looked at the small bed. "I can't take your bed," she whispered, feeling guilty. He waved off her concern. "Please, you need a decent rest. I'll make do on the floor. I have extra blankets somewhere. Really, it's no problem." Maria hesitated, but the exhaustion took over. She sank onto the bed, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Despite the shaky beginning of their meeting, for the first time in hours, she felt a tiny flicker of safety. Meanwhile, Angelo busied himself, throwing down an old blanket on the floor near the table, using a rolled-up jacket as a pillow. As she drifted off, Maria could hear the rain pattering on the window. She was still hurting, still confused. But something about the simple kindness of this stranger gave her hope that maybe tomorrow would not be as dark as the day that had just ended. Chapter 3. The Morning After. Morning came softly, with pale sunlight creeping through the thin curtains. Angelo was already awake, having barely slept. His mind had been filled with worry about his unexpected guest. He rolled off the floor quietly and glanced at Maria, who was still fast asleep. She looked worn out. Dark shadows hung under her eyes. He decided to make something for breakfast. It would not be fancy, just eggs and toast, maybe some coffee. That was all his small kitchen could handle. As he cracked the eggs, he wondered if Maria would want to share why she was left at the altar, or if she would prefer to keep it private. Either way, he planned to offer a listening ear. The smell of food cooking stirred Maria awake. She sat up, blinking in confusion for a moment, then remembered where she was. She rubbed her eyes, feeling a dull ache in her chest when she recalled the events of the previous day. But she also remembered Angelo's kindness and the safety of this humble room. "Good morning," Angelo said softly. "I hope you slept all right. Breakfast is almost ready. I only have simple things." She forced a small smile. "That's okay. Thank you for everything, really." She stood, checking the state of the clothes she had left to dry. Her wedding gown was damp and stained, a sad reminder of what she had lost. She felt tears threaten to rise again, but she pushed them down. Angelo set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. He poured 2 cups of coffee. She joined him, and they ate in silence for a few moments. Though the meal was humble, Maria was grateful for the warmth and nourishment. At last, Angelo decided to speak. "If you want to talk about what happened." Maria stared at her coffee cup for a long time, tracing a finger around its rim. Finally, she whispered, "I come from a poor family. My fiancé, well, his family didn't approve of me. They saw me as less educated, less worthy. But he promised me it didn't matter. We planned a small wedding. I had a simple dress. It was supposed to be enough. Then, on the day of the wedding, his parents convinced him to leave me. He didn't even call me. I arrived at the venue and he was gone. No one told me. I stood there in front of everyone, waiting for a groom who never came." She paused, fighting tears. Angelo reached out and gently placed his hand on hers, giving a little squeeze. She continued, "My own family didn't know how to help. I was so ashamed. I ran. I had enough money for a bus ride, but I ended up going farther than planned. My money ran out, and I was left with nowhere to go. I got off at that stop hoping maybe I could find a friend's place. But it was late, and the storm was so bad. I sat down. Her voice wavered at the end, and tears rolled down her cheeks again. Angelo sighed softly, wanting to ease her pain. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. You have every right to feel hurt, but you're safe now. She nodded, wiping her tears. I don't know what to do next, she admitted. I don't have a job anymore. I left it to focus on the wedding. I don't have much of anything. My parents live far away, and I can't go back to them. It would hurt them to see me like this, and I don't have the bus fare to get there anyway. Angelo glanced around his tiny apartment, thinking. He was barely making ends meet himself, but an idea started to form in his mind. It was risky, but he could not bear the thought of leaving her homeless. You can stay here for a while, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. At least until you find your footing. I know this place is small, but it's something. I'll help you look for a job. Maria opened her mouth to protest. She felt she could not impose on someone she barely knew, but the sincerity in his eyes silenced her. She realized he was offering from his heart, not out of pity but out of genuine care. She lowered her gaze and whispered, "Thank you. I will repay you, I promise." Angelo just smiled softly. Let's just take it one day at a time. They finished breakfast, neither fully aware of how this arrangement would change both their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. Chapter 4. A Glimmer of Hope. That afternoon, Angelo set out to help Maria look for possible jobs around the neighborhood. She borrowed a spare pair of his sneakers, since her own shoes were ruined, and her wedding gown was hardly something she could wear outside. She stayed in the oversized sweats and sweater. They walked through the busy streets, checking the notice boards outside small stores and cafes. Maria felt uncomfortable, almost invisible, as she searched for a place that might give her a chance. Most of the places either had no openings or wanted someone with specific qualifications. She felt her heart drop each time they were turned away. Still, Angelo would encourage her. "Let's not give up," he would say after another disappointment. "We can check somewhere else." They passed by a bakery that smelled of fresh bread and cakes. A hand-written sign in the window read, "Help Wanted." Maria glanced at Angelo, and he nodded. She took a breath, went inside, and spoke to the middle-aged woman behind the counter. The woman introduced herself as Rosa, and she seemed friendly enough, but she had many questions about Maria's experience, none of which Maria could answer favorably. She had never worked in a bakery. She had done some odd jobs back in her hometown, but nothing that involved professional baking. Rosa sighed. "I'm sorry. This job involves early morning shifts, and we really need someone with at least a bit of experience. We don't have time to train someone from scratch." Maria felt her hopes crumble. She thanked Rosa anyway and left with a heavy heart. Angelo tried to cheer her up by buying her a small pastry to nibble on, even though he had very little money. She took it gratefully, tears pricking at her eyes again at the simple act of kindness. They kept walking until their legs ached. They found themselves in front of the restaurant where Angelo worked. It was a small Italian place called La Casa di Gianni. A couple of customers were seated on the outside patio, sipping coffee under a large awning. Angelo led Maria inside, hoping maybe his boss, Mr. Gianni, might offer her anything to help her out. Mr. Gianni was a kind, round-bellied man with a bushy mustache and a loud voice. He greeted Angelo warmly, then noticed Maria at his side. After hearing the short version of her story, he nodded sympathetically. "I don't really need more servers right now, and the kitchen staff is full," he admitted. "But, let's see. Maybe I can use a helper for washing dishes and light prep work. It won't pay much, but it's something." Maria let out a shaky breath of relief. "I'm grateful for any chance," she said, her voice trembling. "Then it's settled," Mr. Gianni said, scribbling on a small paper. "You can start tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. Angelo, make sure you show her around." Angelo grinned, his spirits lifted. Maria had a job. It was only dishwashing and some prep, but it was a start. She could earn a bit of money, maybe save up, and get her own place eventually. The future did not feel quite as bleak anymore. Later that day, they returned to the tiny apartment. Maria collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Angelo brewed some tea and sat at the table. He felt a warmth in his chest, a satisfaction that he had at least helped her move forward. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. But for now, at least, there was a small patch of light in the darkness of her life. Chapter 5. First day on the job. The next morning, Maria woke up earlier than Angelo. She quietly got dressed in the same spare clothes, since that was all she had for now. She pulled her damp hair into a loose ponytail. She was nervous about starting work at the restaurant, worried she might not perform well or might accidentally break something. But she reminded herself she had no choice. This was her chance to stand on her own feet again. Angelo was already awake when she tiptoed into the kitchen. He had toast and coffee ready, though his eyes still looked sleepy. "Ready for your first day?" he asked softly. She nodded, forcing a small smile. "As ready as I can be." They walked together to the restaurant. The morning air was fresh and cool, carrying the promise of a new start. Less than 2 days ago, she had been in a wedding dress, expecting to walk down an aisle and promise her life to someone. Now, she was heading to a new job, living in a tiny apartment with a kind stranger. It felt surreal, but she also felt a small flicker of determination within her chest. At the restaurant, Mr. Gianni handed her an apron and introduced her to the head cook, a tall, stern-looking man named Alberto. "We get busy during lunch and dinner," he said bluntly. "Make sure you keep up, and be careful with the plates, they're expensive." Maria gulped and nodded. She felt a little overwhelmed by his strict tone, but she reminded herself that this was a job. She could do it if she tried. She started washing dishes, her hands soon turning red and wrinkled from the hot water and soap. She also rinsed vegetables, chopped a few ingredients as instructed, and arranged them in bowls. At times, she struggled with the tasks, but she pushed through, remembering she had to learn. By midday, the lunch rush hit. Orders piled in, and Alberto barked commands for more clean plates, bowls, and utensils. Maria's arms hurt from scrubbing, but she kept at it. Steam from the kitchen made the room hot, and sweat trickled down her face. Yet, each time she felt like collapsing, she thought about the kindness Angelo had shown her and the chance Mr. Gianni had given her. She was not going to fail them. Angelo popped into the kitchen between serving tables, giving her a smile or a thumbs up each time he passed. She felt a bit of encouragement from that. Despite the chaos, she managed to stay afloat. By the end of her shift, her back hurt, and she was covered in soap and bits of food, but she had survived her first day. Mr. Gianni handed her a small envelope with her day's pay. It was not much, but it was something. Maria clutched it in her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means so much." He patted her on the shoulder, his gruff but kind manner shining through. "You did well, kid. Keep it up." She left the restaurant with Angelo, feeling both tired and oddly proud. She had earned her first honest money in this new life. For a moment, she forgot the pain of her rejection and focused on what she had achieved today. She vowed to keep moving forward, even if it was one small step at a time. Chapter 6. A Growing Bond. In the weeks that followed, Maria and Angelo settled into a routine. They would wake early, share a modest breakfast if they had enough groceries, and head to the restaurant. Angelo would wait tables, chat with customers, and gather tips. Maria would wash dishes, help in the kitchen, and sometimes wipe down tables if it was not too busy. When the workday ended, they returned to Angelo's apartment. They often picked up cheap groceries on the way home, grabbing whatever was discounted or on sale. Sometimes it was bread, sometimes vegetables for soup, and other times just enough for a small dinner. Money was tight, but they made do. During those evenings they talked tentatively at first, and then more freely. They shared stories about their childhoods. Angelo spoke about how he grew up in a small village, learning to live with little. He had moved to the city in search of better opportunities, but he found only this low-paying job at Mr. Gianni's restaurant. He sent a bit of money back home to help his sick mother. Maria opened up about her family. She told him about her father, who worked hard as a mechanic, and her mother, who sold homemade crafts. They had always tried their best to give her a good life, though there was never much money. She confessed she felt guilty that they had sacrificed for her education, and she felt she had let them down by failing in her marriage plans. Angelo shook his head each time she blamed herself. "You didn't fail," he would say. She appreciated his gentle reassurance. Over time, she found herself smiling more often. She learned that he had a light sense of humor, making silly jokes to brighten her mood. She also discovered that beneath his quiet, polite exterior, he was someone who carried a lot of worries about his bills, his mother's health, and now about Maria's future too. But they found small joys. Sometimes, after they finished the late shift, they would stand by the window and watch the sunset. They did not speak much then, just let the warm colors calm them. On some days off, Angelo would teach Maria bits of the restaurant's menu. She learned to recognize fresh produce, practiced slicing vegetables better, and occasionally tried out new recipes on the small stove in the apartment, though they did not always turn out well. In these small moments, they grew closer in an innocent, gentle way. Maria felt grateful for Angelo's compassion. He never made her feel like a burden. He never pried into her life more than she was ready to share. And in return, she tried to help around the apartment, making it a bit cleaner and cozier. She fixed the tear in one of his shirts. She even put fresh flowers in a small cup by the window whenever she could find cheap ones at the market. Still, they both knew that life was fragile. Angelo worried about how long Maria would stay, whether she could eventually get her own place, and how he could continue to support her when he himself had so little. Maria worried about whether she was taking advantage of his kindness, whether she was becoming a burden instead of a friend. And lingering beneath all of it was the question, what if her past came back in some way? They tried not to think too hard about it. Instead, they let each day pass, building a life of small acts of care and quiet friendship. But life has a way of testing the bonds we form. And in time, they would face challenges that would reveal just how fragile this bond was. Chapter 7. Whispers and Stares. Rumors travel fast, especially in tight-knit neighborhoods. It did not take long for people around the area to notice that Angelo had taken in a young woman. Some folks gossiped about it. They wondered if she was his secret girlfriend, or if something scandalous was going on. Others pitied Maria when they learned bits of her story, though the details were twisted and exaggerated along the way. Whenever Maria walked through the streets, she sometimes caught stares. A few older women would point and whisper. The men at the convenience store would give her curious glances. Though none of them openly mocked her, she felt the weight of their curiosity. It made her uneasy. She was already dealing with her own shame and heartbreak. She did not want extra judgment from strangers. Angelo noticed how tense she got whenever someone gossiped near them. He would try to distract her with conversation or hurry her along. He did not care about rumors. He cared about how they might hurt Maria's feelings. One afternoon after work, Mr. Gianni pulled Angelo aside. "My boy, I hear talk around the block that the woman you brought in might be trouble," he said, not unkindly. You know how people talk. Are you sure everything is okay? Angelo pressed his lips together. Yes, boss. She's been nothing but hard-working. She's kind and respectful. She just had a rough situation, that's all. Mr. Gianni nodded. I believe you, but watch your back, okay? Sometimes, people who are unhappy with their own lives like to stir trouble. Angelo gave a small shrug. I will. Thank you for the concern. A few days later, as Maria finished washing dishes, she overheard a couple of waitresses gossiping in the corner. One of them snickered, Poor Angelo. He's such a soft touch. That girl probably latched onto him to mooch off his paycheck. Maria felt like someone had slapped her. She set down the plate she was washing. She quickly wiped her hands and left the kitchen. She did not want to confront them. She just needed air. She dashed out the back door into the alley, where she leaned against the wall, trying to calm her racing heart. Moments later, Angelo came looking for her. He had been passing by and had caught part of the cruel conversation. He found her with tears in her eyes. She tried to wipe them away before he could see, but it was too late. Hey, don't listen to them, he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. They don't know you. She shook her head. It hurts, though. I feel like maybe I am a burden. Maybe I should leave so you don't get dragged down by rumors. Angelo's gaze hardened. No, he said firmly. I don't want you to go unless you feel it's the right time. People can talk, but they don't know what you've been through. She looked at him, a tear sliding down her cheek. She was about to speak when he pulled her into a gentle hug. He had never hugged her before, and the contact stunned her for a moment. Then she let herself relax against him, tears soaking into his shirt. When she pulled away, he wiped away her tears with the back of his hand and smiled gently. Come on, let's finish our shift and then go home. We can make pasta tonight. She nodded, a shy smile on her face. In that moment, she felt gratitude and something else, a faint flutter in her chest she dared not name. She was not ready to call it love, but it was certainly a strong affection. She told herself that it was just deep gratitude for the man who saved her from the bus stop. But deep down, she sensed that something warmer was growing between them, something that might light up the darkest corners of her life. Chapter 8. Dreams and Doubts. As days turned into weeks, Maria started saving a small part of her wages. She used some of it to buy basic personal items and to contribute to groceries. She insisted on sharing the cost so Angelo would not have to shoulder everything. She also helped tidy the apartment and even tried mending some of Angelo's clothes that had holes. One afternoon, while Angelo was at the restaurant for the evening shift, Maria looked around the small room. She realized just how much of Angelo's kindness was on display. There were little notes he had left for her, reminding her to eat breakfast or to have a good day. There was the worn rug that he insisted she use for her side of the room so her feet would not get cold in the morning. She could not believe how lucky she was to have found him. Still, she felt a pang of guilt. She remembered how her ex-fiance, Gregory, had once been so sweet, sending her flowers and whispering promises of a good life. Then, on their wedding day, he vanished. Could she risk trusting again, especially so soon? But each time she looked at Angelo, she saw a different kind of kindness, one that asked for nothing in return, one that was patient and gentle. She tried to keep her heart guarded, fearing another heartbreak. However, Angelo's constant goodness made it hard not to develop deeper feelings. She found herself thinking about him when he was not around, wondering what he was doing, if he was safe, if he had eaten well. She told herself it was normal concern for a friend, yet part of her suspected it was more. That night, as Angelo returned from his shift, Maria had prepared a simple meal, vegetable soup and bread. He looked surprised when he walked in, smelling the warm food. "Wow, did you cook this?" he asked, dropping his bag by the door. She nodded. "I tried something new. I hope it's good." He tasted it. smiling at her eagerly. "It's delicious." They ate together. She asked about his day, and he told her about a chaotic lunch rush. She mentioned that she was saving money, hoping to eventually rent a tiny place of her own, so she would not burden him. He paused, looking a bit sad at the thought. "You're not a burden," he repeated quietly, swirling his spoon in the soup. "But if that's what you want, I support you." She looked down at her bowl, feeling torn. Part of her longed for independence, to stand on her own. Another part, an ever-growing part, felt drawn to remain by Angelo's side. The thought that they might be drifting apart in the future gave her an ache in her chest. Still, she smiled at him softly. "We'll see," she said, not making a firm promise either way. And so the days continued. Their bond grew in small ways, shared smiles, quiet dinners, late-night conversations under the single light bulb in the kitchen. Yet neither dared to speak what might be forming in their hearts. Fear of rejection and the pain of the past loomed over them, like a silent shadow that both connected and separated them at the same time. Chapter 9. The Night of Revelations. It happened on a quiet evening. The restaurant had closed early for some minor renovations. Angelo and Maria were walking back to the apartment. The sky was clear, and the moon cast a soft glow over the sleeping city. They crossed the old bridge near the bus stop where they had first met. Maria paused for a moment, staring at the spot where she had once sat in her soaked wedding gown. The memory made her shiver, but also filled her with gratitude. She looked at Angelo, and he gave her a knowing look. "Hard to believe it's been several weeks since that night," he said softly. She nodded. "Yes, seems like a different lifetime." They kept walking until they reached the front steps of the apartment building. Instead of going straight inside, Maria lingered by the entrance. She turned to Angelo, who stood next to her, his eyes reflecting the faint light from the street lamp. "You saved me that night," she murmured. "I was so lost. I had no hope left. And then you came." Angelo shrugged, a small smile on his face. "I just did what anyone with a heart would do." She shook her head. "No, not everyone would. Some people passed by and ignored me. But you didn't." Her voice caught. "I don't know how to repay you for that. Sometimes I think about how different my life might have been if you hadn't shown up." He let out a soft sigh. "You don't owe me anything. Having you here has been nice. I've been alone for a long time. It's good to have someone to share the day with, even if it's just a simple meal." Maria took a step closer. Her heart pounded, and she tried to fight down the nervousness. "Angelo," she said, her voice trembling. "Sometimes I think maybe I feel something more than just gratitude." She did not get to finish, because Angelo quickly spoke. "Don't say that if you're not sure." His eyes were filled with concern. "I know you've been hurt. I don't want you to make any choices you might regret." She shook her head. "I'm not saying it lightly. I'm terrified. Honestly, because I barely trust my own heart after what happened. But there's something here, and I can't ignore it." They stood in silence for a few moments, hearts pounding, breath visible in the cool night air. Angelo reached out slowly, taking her hands in his. His touch was warm. "Maria, He paused, searching for the right words. "You've brought light into my life too, but I'm just a simple waiter. I don't have wealth or a fancy home. All I can offer is myself. And I've wanted to tell you that you mean a lot to me. But I didn't want to rush or push you, so I've kept quiet." Tears pricked at Maria's eyes again, but they were not tears of sadness this time. She squeezed his hands gently. "I don't care about money. I just care about the person who saved me when no one else would." A passing car rumbled by, the sound momentarily interrupting the hush of the night. Maria and Angelo stood there, gazing at each other under the dim lamp. Then slowly, as if by some unspoken agreement, they leaned in. Their lips touched in a soft, tentative kiss. It was gentle, filled with both longing and uncertainty. But it also carried a sense of hope, like they had each found a missing piece in the other. When they pulled apart, they both smiled, cheeks flushed. Neither said anything for a moment, letting the reality of their shared confession sink in. At last, Angelo whispered, "Shall we go inside?" Maria nodded, her heart fluttering in her chest. She felt something shift in the air around them. It was the start of something new, something precious. But with that precious feeling came vulnerability. She knew that opening her heart again meant risking pain. Still, she wanted to try. And so they walked upstairs, hand in hand, stepping into the warm glow of the apartment, each trying to contain the flood of emotions swirling inside. They did not know what lay ahead, but for tonight, they held on to the simple fact that they were no longer facing life alone. Chapter 10. Clouds on the Horizon. Despite the warmth of their blossoming love, life remained full of challenges. The rent was coming due, and Angelo's tips had been smaller than usual that month. Maria's job washing dishes was steady, but it did not pay enough to cover all the bills. The small nest egg she had managed to save was not nearly enough to rent a place of her own yet. One morning, while Angelo was out buying groceries, Maria sat at the table, going over their expenses. She frowned at the numbers. She did not want to burden Angelo with all this, but the truth was, living in the city was expensive. If something did not change soon, they would fall behind on the rent. When Angelo returned with a small bag of groceries, Maria showed him the calculations. He winced. "Yeah, I've been worried about that," he admitted. "I've been trying to pick up extra shifts, but business at the restaurant has been slow since the renovation started. We're not getting as many customers as before." She sighed, biting her lip. "I might look for a second job, maybe in the early mornings, or on weekends. It doesn't have to be anything fancy." Angelo nodded. Though the thought pained him, he knew how tired she already was from scrubbing and washing dishes all day. The idea of her working even more hours weighed heavily on him, but he also realized they might not have another option. A few days later, Maria found a small shop that sold handmade items, bracelets, simple crafts, and souvenirs. The owner needed a part-time worker. It was only a few hours in the mornings, helping set up displays and cleaning the shop, but it offered a little extra pay. Maria took it, determined to do whatever she could to help keep their heads above water. Now, her days began before sunrise. She would go to the shop, arrange products, sweep floors, and assist the handful of morning customers. Then she would rush to the restaurant and spend hours standing over the sink or cutting vegetables. By the time she got home at night, she was exhausted, her body aching. Yet, when she saw Angelo's face, her heart lifted. He felt guilty, seeing how tired she was. Sometimes, he wished he had a better job, or had completed a higher education, so that he could support her more comfortably. But all he had was his position as a waiter and a heart full of care. He tried to lighten her load in small ways, massaging her shoulders at night, preparing her coffee in the morning, or surprising her with a small treat after work. Their relationship, though new, grew stronger under the weight of hardship. They learned how to rely on each other in practical ways. Maria realized that love was not about fancy gifts or big houses. It was about small acts of devotion every day, especially when life got tough. Angelo saw how determined Maria was, how she refused to let her heartbreak define her future. He admired her resilience. Still, a silent worry hovered in their minds. What if this was not enough? They feared a sudden cost, an unexpected bill, a medical emergency, or anything else that could tip their fragile finances over the edge. And in the back of Maria's mind, another worry lingered. What if Gregory, her ex-fiance, or his family ever reappeared? She had no idea if they might cause trouble for her, but she decided not to voice this concern to Angelo, not wanting to add more stress to their already heavy load. They pushed on, day by day, hoping that their love and perseverance would be enough to see them through. But sometimes clouds gather before the biggest storm, and they had yet to face the storm that was coming. Chapter 11. An Unexpected Visitor. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon at the restaurant. The lunch rush had ended, and there were only a few tables occupied. Maria was in the kitchen, wiping down counters. Angelo was serving 2 customers, a middle-aged couple. Mr. Gianni sat by the register, flipping through receipts. Then the door swung open, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped in. He looked around, scanning the room. When his gaze landed on Angelo, there was a flicker of recognition. Though Angelo did not recognize him, the man proceeded to a table, sat down, and looked at the menu. Angelo approached, smiling politely. "Hello, welcome to La Casa di Gianni. May I get you something to drink?" The man peered at him with a cool expression. "Coffee, please. Black. And I'd like to speak to Maria if she's here." Angelo's heart skipped a beat. How did this man know Maria? He forced a calm smile. "She's working in the kitchen. May I ask who's asking for her?" The man flicked a piece of dust off his immaculate suit jacket. "You can tell her it's Henry Beckett, Gregory's cousin." A chill ran down Angelo's spine. He nodded stiffly and walked toward the kitchen, heart pounding. He found Maria busy placing cups in a rack. "There's someone here to see you." She looked up, eyebrows knitting. "Who?" "Henry Beckett," Angelo said, swallowing hard. "He says he's Gregory's cousin." The color drained from Maria's face. She nearly dropped the cup she was holding. Taking a shaky breath, she nodded. "I'll go see him." Angelo watched her walk out front with a worried expression. He wanted to accompany her, but he sensed she might need to speak to Henry alone. He positioned himself where he could see them, though ready to step in if necessary. Maria approached the table slowly, hands clasped in front of her apron. She stared at Henry with a mixture of fear and anger. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. Henry sipped his black coffee, his face unreadable. "I've been trying to find you for weeks," he said. "Gregory told me what happened on your wedding day. The family is worried about you." She snorted softly. "Worried about me? Your family is the reason Gregory left me at the altar, and now you show up here?" Henry set the cup down gently. "I won't deny that my aunt and uncle disapproved of you, but Gregory has been miserable since that day. He's been searching, trying to figure out how to make things right. He asked me to come see if you're willing to talk." Maria's jaw tightened. "Talk about what? There's nothing to discuss. He humiliated me in front of everyone. He ruined my life." Her voice trembled with tears she fought to keep in check. Henry sighed. "I won't pretend I understand everything, but Gregory wants to apologize. He wants to see if you might forgive him, or at least speak to him. He's been a wreck, he says. He made a mistake." Maria felt her heart twist. Part of her had once longed for Gregory to come back, to explain himself, to hold her and say sorry. She glanced at Angelo, who was pretending to tidy the bar area but was obviously keeping watch. She turned back to Henry, voice steadier now. "I have no interest in seeing him. My life has moved on. Tell him that I'm fine and I don't need his apology." Henry studied her face. "Are you sure? You're working in a restaurant, washing dishes. You look tired. Gregory can offer you a good life, financial security, a chance to not struggle like this." Maria's anger flared at his words. She leaned forward. "I'd rather wash dishes forever than go back to someone who abandoned me." Henry did not respond right away. He seemed taken aback by her fierce refusal. After a moment, he stood up, pulling out a business card from his pocket. "If you change your mind, call me. Gregory is waiting." Then, with a polite nod, he left some money for the coffee and walked out. Maria stood there, staring at the card as if it were some poisonous thing. She snatched it and crumpled it in her fist. She felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and lingering hurt. Angelo approached. Concern etched on his face. "Maria, are you okay?" She turned to him, eyes watering. They want me to go back. Henry said Gregory regrets it all. She laughed bitterly through her tears. "But I'm not going back. Never. I'd rather." Her voice broke, and she collapsed into Angelo's arms. He held her close, ignoring the curious looks of the few customers left. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," he whispered, stroking her hair. "I'm here for you." She clung to him, the tears falling freely now. Inside, she felt a storm of emotions. Anger that Gregory dared to approach her again after what he did. Confusion about whether she should at least hear him out. Fear about what this meant for her future with Angelo. But above all else, she felt thankful for the man now holding her. He was her rock, her refuge in the storm. Still, she had a sinking feeling this was not the last she would hear from Gregory or his family. She sensed a confrontation was on the horizon. She only hoped that whatever happened, she would not lose the fragile but precious happiness she had found. Chapter 12. Confrontation. It happened faster than Maria expected. Just a few days after Henry's visit, Gregory himself showed up at the restaurant. He arrived right before closing time, dressed in a crisp shirt and trousers, looking like a man who had not missed a single meal. He caught Maria at the back door as she was taking out the trash. She nearly dropped the garbage bag when she saw him. "Gregory?" she managed to say, heart pounding. He raised his hands, trying to appear non-threatening. "Maria, please, wait. I just want to talk," he said, his voice laced with desperation. Her immediate reaction was fear and anger, but she forced herself to be calm. "There's nothing to say," she snapped, setting the trash down. "You left me on our wedding day. You humiliated me. I cried for weeks. Now I'm just supposed to listen to whatever excuse you've come up with?" He flinched. "I made a huge mistake," he admitted, pain evident in his eyes. "I was weak. My parents threatened to cut me off if I married you. I got scared. I know it doesn't excuse what I did. But I've been miserable ever since. Please, I just need to know if there's any chance for us." Maria's anger flared. She thought about all the nights she had cried, sitting at the bus stop in the rain, then ending up in a stranger's apartment. She recalled the shame, the pain, the heartbreak, and she recalled the warmth of Angelo's arms, the kindness in his eyes. She took a deep breath. "No, Gregory, there's no chance. You destroyed my trust. I've started to rebuild my life without you." At that moment, Angelo stepped outside, likely worried because Maria had taken too long. He saw Gregory and his expression darkened. Moving closer, he placed himself beside Maria protectively. "Is this man bothering you?" he asked her softly. Maria slid closer to Angelo. "Gregory, meet Angelo," she said stiffly. He's important to me now. Whatever you came to say, there's no point. Please leave." Gregory's eyes flicked between Maria and Angelo, noticing the closeness between them. A flash of jealousy crossed his face. "You left me for a waiter?" he asked, voice dripping with scorn. Angelo felt a surge of anger but kept his tone calm. "She didn't leave you," he corrected quietly. "You left her, and she's made her choice now." Maria felt gratitude fill her. She reached for Angelo's hand, squeezing it. Gregory's fists clenched, but he seemed more hurt than angry. He sighed, deflating like a balloon. "Maria, please. Let me make it up to you. You don't have to live in poverty." She shook her head firmly. "This is my life, and I choose who shares it with me. It's not about money." Gregory stared at her with a lost expression. He realized that she was serious. He opened his mouth to speak again, but Angelo took a step forward. "I think it's time for you to go," he said evenly, his eyes locked on Gregory. Gregory turned and walked away, shoulders slumped. Maria watched him go, feeling a mix of relief, pity, and lingering anger. She could see the pain in his eyes, but it did not erase what he had done. She leaned into Angelo's shoulder, letting out a shaky breath. "Thank you," she whispered, tears of both sorrow and relief brimming in her eyes. "I was so scared he wouldn't listen." Angelo wrapped his arm around her. "It's okay. I'm here." They stood there in the alley for a moment, letting the tension settle. The overhead light buzzed, illuminating them in a dull glow. Maria knew she had just closed a chapter of her life. She had chosen to let Gregory go, and with him, the dreams she once had of a different future. It was painful, but it also felt freeing. Little did she know, the biggest test of her and Angelo's bond was still to come. Chapter 13. Illness Strikes. Just as Maria and Angelo began to breathe easier, a wave of bad fortune hit. One day, Angelo received a phone call from his sister back in his hometown. Their mother's health had taken a sharp turn for the worse. The medical bills were piling up. There was talk of needing urgent treatment, which cost more than they had. Angelo was beside himself with worry. He wanted to go back home immediately, but he also knew leaving the city meant quitting his job. That would leave him with no income. Still, how could he stay here when his mother needed him? He felt torn, sick to his stomach with anxiety. Maria watched him pace the apartment, phone in hand, tears brimming in his eyes. "I can't lose her," he whispered, voice trembling. "She's all I have left back home. She worked so hard to raise us." Maria felt a surge of protectiveness for this man who had done so much for her. She thought of her own parents. She knew that if either of them fell seriously ill, she would do anything to help. She also realized that Angelo might not have enough money to pay for his mother's treatment if he went back to his hometown without a plan. Tears pricked her eyes as she remembered how helpless she felt at the bus stop. She refused to let Angelo face that kind of desperation alone. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "We'll figure something out," she said firmly. "You helped me, now let me help you." He looked at her, face full of gratitude and shame. "I can't ask you." "You're not asking," she interrupted gently. "I'm offering." They sat at the table, going over their combined savings. It was not much. Even if Angelo emptied his bank account and Maria added her small savings, it would barely cover a fraction of the hospital bills. They considered asking Mr. Gianni for a loan. They thought about selling the few possessions they had, but there was really nothing of value. Despair weighed heavily in the air. Angelo leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "I need to go home," he whispered. "I'll see what I can do once I'm there. Maybe talk to distant relatives or neighbors who might lend something." Maria felt her throat tighten. She did not want him to go, but she understood he had to. The question was what this meant for them. Would he be gone for weeks or months? Would their relationship withstand the distance? Angelo seemed to sense her worry. He took her hands. "I don't want to leave you." She squeezed his hands back. "I know. And I don't want to hold you back. You should go. We'll stay in touch. I'll keep working here and I'll try to send you what little I can." He closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Thank you," he breathed. "You're too good to me." They held each other for a long moment. The future felt uncertain. The happiness they had begun to build seemed fragile, like a flower in the wind. But Maria was determined. She would keep working both her jobs, save every cent she could, and send it to Angelo. Love was more than just a feeling. It was the willingness to do hard things for the sake of the one you cared about. Chapter 14. A Painful Farewell. A week later, Angelo packed his few belongings into a worn backpack. He had given notice to Mr. Gianni. Though the restaurant owner was sad to see him go, he understood. Maria stood by the door, trying to keep her composure. She had taken the day off from her morning job to see him off. They rode the bus together to the station where he would catch a long-distance bus back to his hometown. The ride was mostly silent, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived, he bought a ticket and they waited on a bench outside, the sun beating down on them. Angelo turned to Maria. "I hate leaving you here alone," he said softly. "After everything you've been through, and I." She cut him off by placing her fingertips on his lips. "I won't be alone," she said, tears gathering in her eyes. "I have a job, and I have a purpose. I want you to focus on your mother. She needs you more right now." His eyes welled up. "I'll call you whenever I can. And I'll come back, if you'll have me." She tried to smile, though her chin quivered. "This place will feel empty without you," she admitted. "But of course I'll have you." It was the first time either of them had said those words aloud. They hung in the air, filled with so much emotion that Angelo felt like his heart might burst. He reached for her, and she met him halfway, their arms wrapping around each other. They clung tightly, kissing through tears. The sound of the bus's horn interrupted them. Angelo pulled away reluctantly, wiping his cheeks. He grabbed his bag and walked toward the bus door. Before climbing in, he turned back, giving her one last, long look. "I love you, Maria," he said in a steady voice. Then he disappeared inside. Maria stood there, tears rolling down her face as the bus pulled away. Part of her felt like she was reliving a nightmare someone she cared about leaving her. But this time, it was different. Angelo was not abandoning her. He was going to help his mother, and he had promised to come back. She believed him. After the bus vanished from sight, she took a shaky breath and headed back toward the city. She would work harder than ever, for the man who had once saved her at a bus stop, for the love they had found in a tiny apartment. She refused to lose hope. Chapter 15. Time moves on. In the weeks that followed, Maria busied herself with work to distract from the emptiness she felt. She now rented a smaller, even cheaper room in the same building, wanting to handle the rent on her own. The landlady had nothing else available, so Maria had to make do with a cramped space that barely fit a bed and a chair. Still, she felt proud to be paying for it herself. She continued at the restaurant, now more experienced with the kitchen routines. Mr. Gianni sometimes let her help with basic meal prep, a sign that he trusted her skills. She also kept her morning job at the craft shop, though it paid very little. Every few days, she would receive a phone call from Angelo. He sounded tired, worried about his mother. The medical bills were steep, and his relatives could only do so much. At times, he confided in Maria that he felt hopeless. She did her best to reassure him, promising she would send what little savings she could manage. Their calls were often short, cut off by poor reception or the demands of hospital staff. But each time she heard his voice, Maria felt a surge of determination. She wanted to lighten his burden, to do whatever it took to help. She collected her meager pay, setting aside just enough to feed herself with simple meals, and sent the rest to him. Nights were the hardest. She missed his presence, his gentle jokes, the warmth of his arms. She missed cooking together, missed hearing him hum softly as he washed dishes in the small sink. But she told herself that this was a test of their love. If they could endure this, then perhaps nothing could break them. Sometimes her ex-fiance haunted her dreams. She would see his face and hear him apologize, only to wake in a cold sweat, clutching her pillow. But she reminded herself that she had closed that door. She belonged to a new life now, a life of quiet faith and perseverance. Time passed slowly. Each day melted into the next. The edges of her heartbreak from the wedding day had softened, replaced by a new ache, longing for Angelo. But inside that ache was a tiny flame of hope that refused to go out. Chapter 16. Good news and bad news. One afternoon, while wiping down the tables at La Casa di Gianni, Maria's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She glanced at the screen and saw Angelo's name. Her heart jumped. She quickly stepped outside to answer. Angelo's voice was filled with excitement and relief. "Maria, the treatment worked," he said, nearly breathless. "My mother is responding well. The doctors say she'll be discharged soon." A wave of joy washed over Maria. She laughed, tears springing to her eyes. "That's wonderful!" she exclaimed. "I'm so happy for you. You must be over the moon." "I am," he said. "And it's thanks to your help and my relatives and some neighbors who pitched in. I owe you so much." She shook her head, even though he could not see her. "You don't owe me." He sighed, and she could almost picture him running a hand through his hair. "Still, thank you. Now the bad news. We're still short on some of the hospital costs. My mother won't be fully cleared to leave until that's handled, but we're close." Maria felt her heart tighten. "I can send you a bit more," she offered, though she knew her own finances were nearly at rock bottom. "No," he said firmly. "You've done more than enough. I'll figure out something. Maybe I can work odd jobs here for a while." She swallowed, concern gnawing at her. "You said your mother's being discharged soon, though, right? That means they'll expect payment pretty quickly." He hesitated. "Yes, but I don't want to keep relying on you." Before she could argue, Mr. Gianni poked his head out the door, gesturing that she needed to get back to work. She ended the call with a promise to talk again soon. She returned to the dining area, trying to focus, but her mind spun with worry. She knew Angelo's pride would not let him ask her for more money, but she also knew he was in a tight spot. For the rest of the day, she tried to think of ways to help. She considered selling some of her clothes. She thought about taking a loan, but she had no property or valuables to secure it. The crafts shop would not advance her pay. The frustration ate at her. That night, as she sat alone in her tiny rented room, an idea struck her, a risky, desperate idea. She thought about Gregory's cousin Henry and the business card she had crumpled. She had never thrown it away. It was tucked in the corner of her apron pocket. If Gregory was truly drowning in guilt, maybe he would lend her the money. But she knew that would come with strings attached. Perhaps he would demand she return to him. She shook her head. No, that was out of the question. She would not trade her freedom and her budding relationship with Angelo for money. Then again, maybe there was a possibility to ask for help without giving in to any conditions. She looked at the card, heart pounding. Was it worth the risk for Angelo's sake? Could she protect herself and her new life if she made that call? The conflict tore at her. She set the card aside, burying her face in her hands. This was a dilemma that would test not just her loyalty to Angelo, but also her own ability to stand firm. And she had no idea which path would lead to a real solution. Chapter 17. Love and Sacrifice. Days passed. Angelo's calls became less frequent, as he was busy doing side jobs to raise the remaining hospital fees. Each time Maria did get to speak to him, she heard the exhaustion in his voice. He was stretched thin, juggling his mother's care with trying to find money. Maria felt helpless. She continued with her 2 jobs, sending whatever she could spare, but it was not enough to cover the shortfall. Her worry grew with each passing day. Finally, she decided that waiting was not an option. She needed to do something drastic, and she needed to do it soon. She went back to her room after a long day of washing dishes. With trembling hands, she pulled out Henry's crumpled business card. The phone number was still legible. She stared at it for several minutes, wrestling with her conscience. Then, with a shaky breath, she dialed the number. It rang a few times before a familiar voice answered. Henry Beckett speaking. Her heart pounded. "Henry, it's Maria," she said, voice tight with nerves. He sounded surprised. "Maria, I was hoping you'd call sooner. Is everything all right?" She swallowed. "I need to speak with Gregory. There's something important I need to ask." Henry paused. "I see. He'll be relieved to hear from you." Maria closed her eyes. "Yes. Let's meet at the cafe near the bus station tomorrow afternoon." After they agreed on a time, she hung up. Her hands were clammy, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt like she was playing with fire. But she reminded herself this was for Angelo, for the man who had done so much for her. If she could just get Gregory to lend her the money without conditions, she would save Angelo from a desperate situation. That had to be worth the risk. Sleep did not come easily that night. She lay on her small bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying all the ways this meeting could go wrong. She feared that Gregory might see this as a chance to weasel back into her life. She feared that he would refuse to help unless she agreed to be with him again. But she also hoped, just maybe, that he felt guilty enough to help her out as a friend, or at least as a final act of atonement. By dawn, she had made up her mind. She had to try. With a mixture of dread and determination, she prepared herself for the next day's encounter, praying silently that her choice would not shatter the fragile happiness she had worked so hard to regain. Chapter 18. The Negotiation. The next afternoon, Maria arrived at the small cafe near the bus station. She found a quiet table in the corner and sat down, nerves on edge. The aroma of coffee and pastries did nothing to calm her racing heart. She tapped her foot under the table, checking her phone for the time. Soon, Gregory walked in, followed by Henry at a slight distance. Gregory spotted her and approached with a cautious look. Henry gave them some space, choosing to sit at a nearby table. Gregory settled into the chair across from Maria. She noticed he looked thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. She tried to steel herself against any pity. He cleared his throat. "Maria, thank you for agreeing to meet me." She inhaled slowly, trying to keep her composure. "I need a favor," she said bluntly, not wanting to waste time on small talk. "I need money for someone very important to me, who is dealing with medical bills for his mother." Gregory's eyes flickered with confusion. "And you came to me for that?" She nodded, gripping the edge of the table. "Yes. I can't get a loan from a bank or from friends. I thought maybe you or your family would be willing to lend me what I need." He leaned back, studying her. "Let me guess, this is for the waiter? Angelo, right?" Maria swallowed, but lifted her chin. "Yes, it's for him. He helped me when I had nowhere else to go. Now he needs help. I'm asking you because, well, I thought you might feel you owe me something after what happened." Gregory looked away, guilt darkening his features. "I do owe you," he admitted. "But this is a strange request. You want me to give money to the man you replaced me with?" She bristled at his wording but forced herself to stay calm. "Don't see it that way. Think of it as helping me. And if there's a cost, I'll pay it back. I just need it soon." He stared at her, and for a moment she thought she saw a flash of pain in his eyes. "Maria, I still care about you. If you need help, I'll give it to you, but there's a part of me that hopes we can reconcile someday. I can't pretend otherwise." Her chest tightened. "Gregory, that's not on the table," she said firmly. "I just want a financial loan, nothing more." He sighed heavily. "All right, if that's all you want, I'll help you. Just name the amount." She named the figure, knowing it would cover the remaining hospital costs and a bit more, just to give Angelo some breathing room. Gregory did not even blink at the sum. "I can transfer it to you by the end of the day. But I want to make sure you're not taken advantage of. Once your friend pays off his bills, you'll still be left with nothing. My offer still stands. If you need anything, or if you change your mind about us, you can come to me." Maria's throat felt dry. She reached into her pocket for the pen she always carried and scribbled something on a napkin. "Here's my bank account info," she said. "Transfer the amount there. I'll consider this a loan, and I'll pay you back over time. I don't want any strings attached." Gregory took the napkin, folded it, and slipped it into his pocket. He looked at her with a mix of sadness and longing. More determined, I guess. That's what life does to us. She stood up, ignoring the flutter in her chest. "Thank you for helping me," she said simply. Then she walked away, passing Henry's table. He gave her a nod and a slight smile, as if to say he approved of how she handled things. Outside, Maria exhaled a breath she had been holding. Her legs felt shaky, but she also felt a surge of relief. If Gregory kept his word, Angelo's mother would be cared for. She took out her phone and texted Angelo. "I may have found a way to cover the hospital bills. I'll explain soon. Don't worry." As she headed back to work, she prayed she had done the right thing. She was stepping into dangerous territory, inviting her past back into her life. But if it meant saving Angelo and his mother from further suffering, she was willing to take that chance. She only hoped that fate would not punish her for it. Chapter 19. The wire transfer. True to his word, Gregory transferred the money that very evening. Maria was at her small table in her rented room when she received the bank notification on her phone. She let out a shaky sigh of relief. It was more than she asked for, just a bit extra. She felt an odd pang in her chest. Without hesitation, she forwarded almost the entire amount to Angelo's account, keeping only a small portion to repay Gregory in installments. Then she called Angelo, heart pounding, eager to hear his reaction. He answered on the second ring, voice weary but hopeful. "Maria?" She took a breath. "Angelo, check your account. The money should be there to cover your mom's bills." There was a pause, and she imagined him pulling up the information. His sharp intake of breath told her he had seen it. How did you get this much?" he asked, voice quivering. She closed her eyes. "I asked someone who owed me a favor, an old connection." He was silent for a moment. "Maria, you didn't do anything that would hurt you, did you?" A tear slipped down her cheek. She pictured his concerned face, the way he always wanted to protect her. "I'm fine," she said softly. "I promise there are no big strings attached. I just wanted to help you and your mother." He let out a trembling sigh. "I don't even know how to thank you. It changes everything. She can get discharged, and I can pay off the debt here. I wish I could hug you right now." She smiled through her tears. "Me too," she whispered. "Just make sure your mom gets better. That's all I need." They spoke a bit longer, discussing the details of his mother's release and how soon he might return. She glanced at her phone again, noticing a text from Gregory. "I hope this helps you. Let me know if you need anything else." She reread the text with a blend of gratitude and caution. She typed back a short reply, "Thank you for your help." Then she set the phone aside, wanting to leave it at that. She was determined to keep their contact strictly about the loan, nothing more. Laying down on her bed, she stared at the ceiling, a smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in a long while, she felt like her life and Angelo's were finally turning a corner. The future was still uncertain, but at least a major burden had been lifted. She drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the day when Angelo might walk back into her life, free of worry, and into the home they might share together. Chapter 20. Suspense at the door. A week passed, and Maria's excitement grew as she waited for Angelo's return. His mother was now recovering at home. He was arranging a few final details before leaving his hometown. Each day, Maria polished the tiny room, as if preparing for his arrival even though she knew he might want them to move somewhere slightly bigger. One evening after her shifts, Maria returned to her cramped room. She set down her bag, planning to make a quick dinner. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She hurried to open it, hoping maybe, just maybe it was Angelo. But when she pulled the door open, she found Gregory standing there, holding a plastic bag that seemed to contain groceries. Her stomach dropped. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight. He gave a hesitant smile. "I wanted to see if you were okay, and I brought you some groceries. I figured you could use them." He lifted the bag, which had vegetables, milk, bread, and other items. Maria's pulse raced with anxiety. She did not want Gregory intruding on her space. "You shouldn't have come here," she said tersely, stepping aside to let him inside only out of politeness. He looked around the tiny room, eyes filled with both pity and regret. "This is smaller than I expected," he commented softly. She bristled. "I'm fine. I like having my own space. And I'm working hard. There's no shame in living modestly." He set the bag on the small counter. "Of course, I didn't mean to offend you," he said quickly. I can't help but feel responsible. You once thought you were going to start a life with me, in a nice house, and here you are." Her anger bubbled up. "Don't pity me. I'm okay with my life. I only contacted you to help Angelo, not to invite you back into my personal affairs." He nodded, looking chastened. "Understood. I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I truly just wanted to make sure you were all right." She folded her arms. "I appreciate the groceries, but I don't need more from you. Please respect my privacy." Gregory hovered awkwardly for a moment, then sighed. "I'll go. But just know I'm here if you need anything. I'm not asking for you to come back to me, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't still hope for that. I just want to make sure you're safe and cared for." She said nothing, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness. She watched him leave, shutting the door firmly behind him. Once alone, she stared at the bag of groceries, tears pricking her eyes. She resented the fact that Gregory could just walk into her life with expensive food, as if trying to fix everything with money. But she also felt a surge of guilt for how harsh she had been. He had come with good intentions, maybe, yet she could not allow him to disrupt what she was building with Angelo. She knew in her heart that her future was with Angelo, not with the man who had abandoned her. Still, the suspense lingered. She worried about how Angelo would react if he knew Gregory was showing up at her door. She feared that Gregory might not respect her boundaries, and she dreaded that his presence might rekindle old wounds in her heart. That night, she tossed and turned in bed, wondering if fate was testing her resolve once again. Chapter 21. Return and Revelation. Several days later, Angelo returned. It was late afternoon when Maria heard a familiar knock at her door. She rushed to open it, and there he was, exhausted but smiling, a small backpack slung over his shoulder. She threw her arms around him, unable to contain her joy, tears of relief streaming down her face. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "I missed you," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "So much has happened, but I kept thinking about coming back to you." She pulled him into the tiny room, shutting the door behind them. They sat on the edge of her small bed, and he told her how his mother was stable now. He had left her in the care of his sister, who lived nearby. The debt was mostly paid off, though he still had to send some money each month. "How can I ever repay you for that loan?" he asked softly, taking her hands in his. "You said it was someone who owed you a favor. Are you sure there are no conditions?" Maria's face clouded. She took a moment to gather her courage. "Angelo, I need to tell you something about that. The man who gave me the money. It was Gregory, my ex-fiance." Angelo stiffened. "What?" She quickly explained the situation. How Gregory's cousin had come, how she had asked Gregory for the loan, and how he had agreed. She also confessed that Gregory had shown up at her place with groceries, uninvited. Angelo's face was a mixture of hurt, shock, and a trace of anger. He stood up, pacing the small room. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "I had a right to know." She stood as well, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was afraid you'd be upset or feel like I was betraying our relationship. but I did it for you. I couldn't stand by and watch you struggle with your mother's bills." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I understand you wanted to help. It's Gregory, the man who left you at the altar. He put you through so much pain, and now he's meddling in your life again. It makes me uneasy." She placed a trembling hand on his arm. "I know, but this was the only way to get the money quickly. I haven't agreed to anything else. I'm not reconciling with him. I did this for us, for your mother." His anger softened into sadness. He pulled her into a hug, pressing his cheek to her hair. "I hate that you had to go to him, but I understand why you did it," he murmured. "Thank you. I just don't want him to think he can buy your forgiveness." She nodded against his chest. "He can't. My heart belongs to you." They stood there, holding each other, letting the tension ease. But there was an unspoken worry in the air. Gregory's role in their lives was not done. The loan still existed, and he had already proven he might push boundaries. They would have to be vigilant, united in their resolve. Still, for now, they had each other. They had survived storms before, and they believed they could weather this one too. Their love, after all, had grown from the darkest night at a bus stop. If they had made it this far, they could stand against anything together. Chapter 22. Building a Future. In the weeks that followed, Angelo and Maria worked side by side at La Casa di Gianni. With Angelo back in his old position, the place felt livelier. Mr. Gianni was thrilled to have his reliable waiter again, and Maria found relief in having Angelo close. They pooled their resources, saved diligently, and searched for a slightly bigger room to rent. Eventually, they found a small apartment in a quieter part of town, nothing fancy, just a bedroom, a living area, and a tiny kitchen. But it was affordable. They signed the lease together, feeling like they were taking a real step forward in life. Gregory sent Maria occasional texts, checking on how she was doing, sometimes asking if she needed more assistance. She kept her replies polite and brief, determined to maintain a safe boundary. She also insisted on sending him small payments whenever she could, to repay the loan. Occasionally, Gregory would suggest meeting in person to talk things through, but she declined. She made it clear she was grateful for his help, but had no interest in rekindling a relationship. Angelo knew about these texts and kept a close eye, ready to intervene if necessary. Still, there was no direct confrontation for now. With the new apartment, life settled into a hopeful rhythm. Maria decorated the space with cheap but colorful items. She put potted plants by the window, and Angelo hung simple curtains. They shared the household chores, cooked meals together, and laughed at their misadventures, like the time the sink clogged, flooding the kitchen, or when Angelo attempted to fix the flickering overhead light and nearly fell off the stool. Their love deepened. Some nights, they stayed up late, talking about the future. They daydreamed about opening their own small eatery someday, a place where Angelo could greet guests with his warm smile and Maria could work in the kitchen, perfecting simple but tasty dishes. It was a far-off dream, but it kept them inspired. Sometimes, Maria would still wake from nightmares about being left alone at the altar. Angelo would soothe her, holding her close until she drifted back to sleep. Other times, he would worry about his mother's condition or the possibility that something might happen again. In those moments, Maria stood by him, reminding him they had already overcome so much. They learned that true love was not just about passion and romance. It was about sacrifices, shared struggles, and building each other up when life weighed them down. Each day, they chose each other, and that choice gave them strength. Chapter 23. The Final Storm. One afternoon, while Maria was chopping vegetables in the restaurant's kitchen, a sudden commotion arose at the front. She heard Mr. Gianni yelling, chairs scraping, and Angelo's raised voice. Alarmed, She set aside the knife and hurried out to see what was happening. Her heart lurched at the sight. Gregory stood there, eyes wild, arguing with Angelo. Mr. Gianni looked furious, trying to intervene. A few customers gawked, not sure what to do. "What's going on?" Maria asked, rushing over. Angelo turned to her, face flushed. "He stormed in, demanding to see you," he explained. "He was causing a scene." Gregory pointed a finger at Angelo. "I'm not leaving until I talk to her," he nearly shouted. "You can't keep me away forever!" Mr. Gianni stepped in, voice stern. "Young man, you're disrupting my business. If you don't calm down, I'll have to call security." Gregory ignored him, turning his attention fully to Maria. "Why haven't you answered my messages?" he demanded. "I know you're repaying the loan, but you can't just shut me out." Maria felt her pulse thunder in her ears. She had indeed been ignoring his texts lately, not wanting any more conflict. "Gregory, you're causing a scene," she hissed, forcing herself to stay calm. "We can talk outside, but only if you promise not to shout." He nodded, trying to steady his breathing. Maria cast an apologetic look at Mr. Gianni, who waved his hand in a gesture that said, "Handle this." Angelo followed them to the sidewalk, staying close by her side. Once outside, Gregory paced back and forth, raking his hand through his hair. "I just wanted to see you, to talk in person," he said, voice still shaking with emotion. "This is not how I planned it." Maria crossed her arms. "I've told you, I have no interest in rekindling anything. I'm grateful you helped me with the money, but that's it." Gregory's eyes shone with hurt. "You say that, but I can't accept it. I can't stop thinking about what we had. I know I messed up, but I can't just walk away." Angelo stepped forward, voice firm but calm. "Gregory, you need to respect Maria's decision. She's happy now. Let her be." Gregory glared at Angelo. "You think I'll just stand by while you take what was supposed to be mine?" he growled. "You're a nobody, a waiter. You can't give her the life she deserves." Maria felt rage flare up. "Stop it!" she snapped. "This has nothing to do with money or status. I love Angelo, and this conversation is over." Gregory's shoulders slumped, tears forming in his eyes. He looked at Maria with desperation. "Please," he begged. "I know I hurt you, but don't I deserve a second chance?" She shook her head, her own eyes brimming with tears. "You had a chance, on our wedding day, and you left. My heart belongs to someone else now. I'm sorry, but it's time you move on." Gregory stared at her for a moment, heartbreak etched on his face. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Maria stood there, breathless, tears slipping down her cheeks. Angelo wrapped an arm around her. She rested her head on his shoulder, trembling. Mr. Gianni came out, looking concerned. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently. Maria managed a shaky nod. "I'm sorry for the trouble," she whispered. He patted her on the shoulder. "Go take a few minutes to calm down, then come back in. I'll make sure no one bothers you." Maria and Angelo stepped aside, finding a quiet corner. She buried her face in his chest, letting out the sobs she had been holding back. He stroked her hair, murmuring reassuring words. "It's over," he said softly. "He's gone." But she could not stop crying. Even though she was firm in her love for Angelo, seeing Gregory like that tore at old wounds. It reminded her of the pain she had once suffered. Yet, in the midst of her tears, she also felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She had finally laid everything bare, faced him head-on, and told him the truth. She had moved on. As Angelo held her, she felt the last remnants of her old heartbreak lift away. She was free, truly free, to embrace the life she was building with this gentle, selfless man. Her tears began to subside, replaced by a calm warmth. Despite the chaos, the final storm had passed. She clung to Angelo, determined to hold on to the love they had found, no matter what trials life might throw at them next. Chapter 24. A Happy Ending. Months rolled by, peaceful and full of honest work. Gregory stopped contacting Maria, and his abrupt visit to the restaurant proved to be his last attempt to win her back. She continued to send small payments to repay the loan, determined to cut all ties once her debt was cleared. Meanwhile, she and Angelo grew closer than ever. Their shared struggles had strengthened their bond, teaching them the true meaning of love. Together, they saved enough money to buy a second-hand scooter, which Angelo used to ferry them around the city, a step up from the old bicycle he used to ride. Mr. Gianni, impressed by their dedication, promoted Angelo to head waiter, and Maria was given more responsibilities in the kitchen, even getting to assist with cooking on some busy nights. Though money was still tight, they were able to afford small pleasures. They decorated their apartment with a few cozy touches, and on special occasions, they treated themselves to a nice dinner at a nearby cafe. One cool evening, after a long day's work, they returned to their little home. Maria noticed that Angelo seemed nervous, fidgeting with his bag. She asked if he was all right, and he nodded, but his eyes were shining with excitement. "Let's sit," he said, guiding her to the small table. He took her hands, swallowing hard. "Maria, I don't have a ring, not yet. But there's something I want to ask you." Her heart fluttered. She had a guess about what he was going to say, and her entire being trembled with anticipation. He took a breath, eyes locked on hers. "From the moment I found you at that bus stop, I felt something in my heart that I couldn't explain. Over time, that feeling grew into love. We've faced so many hardships, and yet you've stayed by my side. I can't imagine life without you." He paused, voice quivering. "I know I'm just a waiter. I don't have wealth or fancy things, but I promise I'll work hard every day to make you happy. Maria, will you marry me?" She stared at him, tears filling her eyes. A flood of memories washed over her. The stormy night at the bus stop, waking up in his small apartment, the heartbreak she carried, and the gentle way he helped her heal. Now he was asking her to share a future. "Yes," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. His face lit up in pure joy. They embraced, laughing and crying at the same time. It was not a fancy proposal, not the kind with cameras and big crowds, but it was perfect for them two souls who had found each other in the darkest hours and learned that true love was about kindness, patience, and sacrifice. Their wedding was small. Mr. Gianni offered the restaurant as a venue. A few close friends and co-workers attended. Angelo's mother, healthier now, managed to travel for the occasion. Maria's parents came as well, tears of pride in their eyes as they saw how far their daughter had come. They did not spend a fortune on decorations or gowns, but the atmosphere was filled with warmth and sincerity. When Maria walked down the aisle this time in a simple white dress that she had saved up for, she felt no fear, no shame. She saw Angelo waiting for her at the makeshift altar, his eyes brimming with tears of happiness. In that moment, she finally understood. The heartbreak she had endured was just a path leading her to the man who truly cherished her. They exchanged vows, voices trembling with emotion. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, cheers and applause filled the restaurant. Angelo kissed Maria, and the world around them seemed to glow with an inner light. That night, as they stood under the stars outside the restaurant, Maria looked at Angelo. She thought about how he had once taken her in, a rejected bride at a bus stop, lost and alone. Now he was her husband, and they had a life ahead of them that was theirs to shape together. In the end, the biggest surprise was not the drama or the heartbreak. It was the quiet power of kindness, the way a single act of compassion could lead to a love story more beautiful than either of them had ever dreamed. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all. In a world that can be harsh and unforgiving, A simple gesture of help can blossom into a lifetime of devotion and a happy ending no one could have seen coming.